Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you're having a great day because it's the first day of spring. I'm really looking forward to some good weather. Now, as we travel down the path of self improvement, we focus on some really intense topics. If you haven't checked out the videos, feel free to do so. Our topic today is defense mechanisms. Now, I focus on some deep topics because I personally feel most of the things, situations, circumstances actually that we face has a lot to, as adults, has a lot to do with our childhood. So I always like to get to the root of the problem. Now, what does defense mechanisms have to do with self-improvement? Well, let's think about it for a second. Short for defenses is defend. When we feel the slightest hurt, from something or because of someone, our first instinct is to defend ourselves. Now, as children, we all experience some kind of pain through our caregivers, our teachers, our peers, our friends, and we use defense mechanisms to survive and cope with painful situations. Now, as adults, these defensive walls that we build to protect us as children has caused disruption, not only in the relationship we have with ourselves, but with others as well on a professional and personal level. And we may not be aware of this, consciously aware of this. How are we causing disruption in our relationships? By attacking, defending, running away, and shutting down. It's the fight or flight mode, basically. So, what are defense mechanisms? Well, defense mechanisms are protective coping strategies adopted by the brain to shield us from painful feelings. You could say the hard part is breaking down these defenses, right? We all have defenses. Some are more sophisticated than others, but all of them are protective mechanisms used by the brain to help us cope. For an example, okay, a child who's now an adult had a parent who was constantly putting him down and rejecting him, rejecting his love. He now has a problem as an adult showing his feelings to women because he's afraid of being rejected. Um, because his mother rejected him, he's now afraid to open himself up. His wall, he built his own defense wall, but he doesn't realize that it's causing more problems for him now as an adult because he's afraid. He's afraid of rejection. And because there's so many defense mechanisms, if he were to look defense mechanisms up, which I'm going to post a whole list of the different kinds, he would know that regression is what is happening to him. He basically stored in his memory all of those negative feelings that his caregiver projected onto him, and now what he's doing is it has carried over into his adult life and is projecting onto the person that is trying to actually love him. He is afraid of loving back because he doesn't know how, because he was never taught. So that's pretty deep. I want to go through an article, some highlights from an article that I read from Robert Burney, and it's a book actually called The Dance of Wounded Souls. And what he does is he gives his thoughts on defense mechanisms and how it relates to the relationships we have with others. And basically what he says is that you each have emotional buttons that trigger old defensive reactions, fears, and insecurities. And you are sitting next to the person who was specifically prepared and trained to be specialists in pushing your buttons. I take that as he's saying the relationships that we have with others. When we meet these people and they trigger something in us, we point the finger at them when we should be more pointing the finger at ourselves because they're triggering something within us that has not been healed. He says, the gift you will give each other, you will be pushing those buttons. These buttons will help you uncover the wounds that need to be healed. He says, in order to have healthy relationships with self, with our inner child, our emotional wounds, with other people, with concepts like romance and success, it is very important to be conscious of and be willing to change the intellectual paradigm we are empowering both consciously and subconsciously. Our subconscious intellectual paradigm was adapted by our ego in early childhood in response to our emotional experience of being a child. And he says our ego adapted itself to the environment it was experiencing. It developed emotional and behavior defense systems in reaction to the emotional pain we experienced growing up with our parents, who were also wounded codependents. Now, my thoughts on this topic is that he is correct. Most of the relationships we have with others really helps us get to know who we are, because when they do something and it triggers a reaction out of us, unconsciously we don't realize that we're still holding a lot of the defense mechanisms we use to protect ourselves from childhood in our adult life. And they're really destructive, and they can cause a lot of pain in our lives. So I know a whole lot about holding up walls because of my upbringing. I had to protect myself in my environment and survive. And the only way I could do that was to always be in attack mode, always be on standby for anything that happened to me. So really, these defenses, the defensive wall, I call it, I am learning to pretty much lower those walls down and bring them down slowly but surely. I'm a work in progress, and so are we all. But I had to learn to be aware of my actions towards others who wanted to get close to me, because I was afraid of letting that wall down and exposing my vulnerability. But vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually you're feeling free and whole to be yourself. So if you struggle with letting people into your heart, it could be because you had a very hurtful, painful childhood, or you are afraid of getting hurt. And that could be based on a personal relationship or professional, where we're afraid to take criticism from other people. We get in defense mode. We're ready to attack. Or afraid of rejection. We're ready to attack. As again, most of these reactions stem from the experiences we had in childhood. The point is to not get caught up in the fight or flight mode. Life is a learning experience, and the relationships we have with others are here to teach us something about ourselves. So just know life is a learning experience, and what happened to you in the past should not determine your future. We all overreact to situations that reminds us of a past hurt. So what I ask for you is to be aware of your behavior and know everybody is not out to get you. I had to learn that myself. These walls need to be torn down to feel free and feel loved and whole. Most of the time, we're not even aware that we create many of our problems in our relationships because we were not taught how to be in productive and healthy relationships. So all you have in your heart is love. We are love. Love is what exists in us. That's love. Outside of that, we've learned everything else through others, and that's just an illusion. But love is not an illusion. Love is real. So we have to get back to our love, get back to loving ourselves and understanding what love really is, and that's loving all of you unconditionally and others as well. So everything else is a learned behavior that we must change if we want to build healthy relationships, not only with ourselves, but with others as well. So on that note, the exercise I would like for you to try is I'm going to post a couple of links. One of them is the different kinds of defense mechanisms. There are many. And you can look at those defense mechanisms and see which one you may can relate to. And then I'm going to also post a coping article to teach you how to cope with those defense mechanisms so that you can overcome and be a better person, which we're all a work in progress, and there's always room to improve in our lives. So on that note, I leave you with a quote, my own personal quote. Fear of love creates a wall, but in order to love, we must be willing to fall. Stay tuned for our next video on Veils of Illusions that focuses on changing our beliefs and accepting our flaws without feeling guilt, shame, resentment, and rejection. Thank you for joining me. God bless. Take care.